Hello. Today we are going to continue our study of Judges with the story of Abimelech. If we rewind a little bit into the end of chapter 8 of Judges, that chapter wraps up with the story of Gideon's death. Now, Gideon had lived to be an old man. He had 70 sons and many wives, and he also had a concubine who lived in Shechem. She's a Canaanite. And the concubine had a son named Abimelech. Now, Abimelech is the antithesis of the judges that were set up by God. Abimelech decided that he wanted to be king and that he was going to set himself up to be in charge. So he goes to his mother's brothers in Shechem and says, which would you rather? Would you rather be subject to 70 of Gideon's sons, or would you rather be subject to one of your own? So he played up that Canaanite part of his ancestry and the brotherhood. So the people, his brothers, his uncles rather, of Shechem were inclined to follow Abimelech. So they gave him money from the temple of Baal-berith, and he used it to hire mercenaries basically to follow him. Now, the people of Shechem, this is a cultural center for the worship of Baal-berith, and Baal-berith basically means the covenant Baal. So this is where they believe that they have a covenant relationship with this foreign god. Abimelech kills all of his half-brothers except for one, the youngest, Jotham, who hid. Then all the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo gathered beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. And when Jotham heard about this, he went to the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to them, "Listen to me, citizens of Shechem, so that God may listen to you." One day the trees went out to anoint a king for themselves. They said to the olive tree, "Be our king." But the olive tree answered, "Should I give up my oil, by which both gods and men are honored, to hold sway over the trees?" Next the trees said to the fig tree, "Come and be our king." But the fig tree replied, "Should I give up my fruit so good and sweet to hold sway over the trees?" Then the tree said to the vine, "Come and be our king." But the vine answered, "Should I give up my wine, which cheers both gods and men, to hold sway over the trees?" Finally, all the trees said to the thorn bush, "Come and be our king." The thorn bush said to the trees, "If you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon." So the thorn bush here is an analogy to Abimelech, which was very appropriate given that nothing of value comes from a thorn bush. So Jotham continues, "If you've acted honorably and in good faith when you made Abimelech king, and you have been fair to Jerubbaal and his family, and if you have treated him as he deserves, and to think that my father fought for you, risked his life to rescue you from the hand of Midian, but today you have revolted against my father's family, murdered his 70 sons on a single stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his slave girl, king over the citizens of Shechem because he is your brother. If then you have acted honorably and in good faith toward Jerubbaal and his family today, may Abimelech be your joy, and may you be his too. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and let fire come out from you, citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and consume Abimelech." Then Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech. After Abimelech had governed Israel 3 years, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem, who acted treacherously against Abimelech. So treachery begets treachery. Abimelech gained power through treachery, and he's going to lose power through treachery. God did this in order that the crime against Jerubbaal's 70 sons, the shedding of their blood, might be avenged on their brother Abimelech and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him murder his brothers. In opposition to him, the citizens of Shechem set men on the hilltops to ambush and rob everyone who passed by, and this was reported to Abimelech, so tensions began to rise. Now the people of Shechem become quite fickle, and they switch their allegiance to a man named Gaal, son of Ebed. And they gather up the wine from the field, and they have themselves a little festival, and everybody's drinking and eating and getting happy, and they basically kind of get to talking bad about Abimelech. So Gaal stirs everybody up and says, so who is this guy? Who put him in charge? Isn't he Jerubaal's son, Gideon's son? Isn't Zebul his deputy? Who are these people? Serve the men of Hamor, Shechem's father, which basically is saying, you know, this guy's half Israelite. What are we doing following him? And then says, you should be under me. I would say to Abimelech, call out your whole army, let's go to war. So then some fighting ensues. Abimelech divides his people into 4 companies and strategically locates them. And they go out into the night and hide. And Gaal goes out and sees the people of Abimelech, or sees Abimelech and his soldiers coming down, and starts to freak out. Says, look, the people are coming down out of the mountains. But the deputy says, oh no, you're mistaken, that's just shadows. And Gaal says to him, no, look, they're coming out from the center, and there's a company coming down from the soothsayer's tree, which is just a landmark there. And Zebul says to him, where's your big talk now, you who said, who is Abimelech, that we should be subject to him? Aren't these the men you ridiculed? Go out and fight them. So Gaal led out the citizens of Shechem, and they fought Abimelech. Abimelech chased him, and many fell wounded in the flight, all the way to the entrance to the gate. Abimelech stayed in Arumah, and Zebul drove Gaal and his brothers out to Shechem. The next day the people of Shechem went out to the fields, and this was reported to Abimelech. So he took his men, divided them into 3 companies, and set an ambush on the field. When he saw the people coming out of the city, he rose to attack them. Abimelech and the companies with him rushed forward to a position at the entrance of the city gate. And the 2 companies rushed upon those in the fields and struck them down. All that day Abimelech pressed his attack against the city until he had captured it and killed its people. Then he destroyed the city and scattered salt over it, basically symbolically condemning it to perpetual barrenness and desolation. On hearing this, the citizens in the tower of Shechem went into the stronghold of the temple El-Berith. When Abimelech heard that they had assembled there, he and all of his men went up to Mount Zelman. He took an axe and cut off some branches and ordered all of his men to do the same. They dragged all the branches down and put all of the wood around the bottom of the tower and set fire to the tower, which in turn set fire to the people, which fulfilled the curse of Jotham. Back to the imagery of the bush, the thorn bush spitting out fire and burning the cedars of Lebanon. So Abimelech then went to Thebez and besieged it and captured it. So he's going through all of these cities now and conquering again all the people of Shechem, taking by violence what he had initially claimed by treachery. So inside the city, however, was a strong tower to which all the men and women, all the people of the city fled. They locked themselves in and climbed up in the tower roof. Abimelech went to the tower and stormed it, but as he approached the entrance to the tower to set fire to it, like he had previously to the tower of Shechem, a woman dropped a millstone on his head and cracked his skull. Hurriedly, he called his armor bearer and said, draw your sword and run me through. Kill me. I don't want to be known as having been killed by a woman. So his servant ran him through, and he died. And when the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they went home. Thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also made the men of Shechem pay for all their wickedness. The curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came on them. So, ironically, let me mention that even though Abimelech did not want to be known as having been killed by a woman, he was in fact known for having been killed by a woman. His servant running a sword through him didn't really serve him. And that ultimately God is our king and God is in charge of all things. And when we trust God, God will basically ensure that justice is served. And in this case, God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech. Trust the Lord. Bye.